Hello, we're doing a Quartz Simp IS3 run today. We have some extra rules apart from being 4 only. Here they are. We must pick Quartz at the start and E2 her at the first opportunity. We must value items based on how much they benefit Quartz. Must deploy Quartz as the first operator in every encounter. Quartz must kill all the bosses. And I cannot use Deep Cover or Jaya. We'll follow those rules throughout the run. Let's go. The reason I banned Deep Cover in particular is because I'm forced to start with a guard, supporter and medic to get Quartz at the start. And Deep Cover can basically solo all of the stages on the first 2 floors at low difficulty. So if I had her, that would make it boring, I think. We pick Gavio because it's consistent sustain and I don't like pressing buttons too much. The first 2 floors are fairly easy, even with Quartz. The enemies just do very little damage. Oh, something I should note in this run. Throughout it you'll see me only use Quartz S2. This is mostly on a whim. Her S1 is generally her better skill, because the damage from them is similar, and you don't get increased damage from S1 like you do with S2. Though, even though they're similar on paper, S2 tends to output better damage in practice, because her attack is so high, she tends to overkill a lot and waste a lot of damage. Because S2 has lower attack but faster attack speed, it overkills less. So in practice it gives better results, even though technically there's little difference. Observing the rules, we deployed Quartz first. Honestly, this is kind of useful for Quartz, because medics have higher defense than her, so there's less healing needed that way. I really love getting ducks and bears on this stage, because the water slows them down and gives you a free kill. Sadly we didn't get one this time. This is an Ascension 0 run, so it's pretty straightforward. I did it a few days ago and I was mostly just getting used to the stages. Something that's worth knowing when you are selecting squads early on, you need some form of stun. There's this Stingray enemy that's a floater from chapter 9 that does massive damage and has a lot of health and range. And if you can't ground it, it's really dangerous. You need to stun it to take it out of the air, so it can be blocked. And it loses its range attack when that is done. It's way more dangerous than the equivalent enemy in chapter 9. So it's really recommended to get some stun when you play IS3. Just for that enemy, it's way too useful to have. Even on emergency, the stun snipers don't do any damage. Even on higher ascension, they're not. This stage is really easy. If you have a blocking unit and something that can tank arrows, it's a free win. We got the first great item for Quartz, 1% health again. With her having around 6-7,000 health on an average IS2 run, that's 60-70 health per second, it's great at keeping her alive. We don't have anything that benefits Quartz in the shop, so we will pick the hammer to make future items that benefit Quartz cheaper. I'm looking for where the emergency is, so we can make sure to do that. Picking between the 2 stages. Ebb is easier if you have ranged units, but it's also kind of boring. Omen's the harder one for me, so I wanna try that one to test out how Quartz will do. We have an E2 Quartz already, so she has plenty of health again. I'm not deploying her right away because of that enemy on the left. It does a lot of physical damage. And we can't deploy something else because we must deploy Quartz first. So, we deploy Quartz first, and immediately after that we deploy Gavio. You can see her take a bunch of damage, and then we get Pudenku to try and kill this enemy. She's facing to the left because otherwise she will target the normal enemies. The debuff from this thing is the DH debuff, it reduces defense. I'm sure that will bother Quartz a lot. We have an E1 Gavio still, so it's a bit hard to sustain 2 damage from this thing. This is kind of a mistake from me. I should have used the dice here to actually get the kill on this enemy. If I did that, everything would have went smoothly. But the damage between the defender and that thing is too high, and Quartz gets killed. Thankfully, we've killed most of the enemies already, so we don't lose too many lives. When you lose lives in IS3, it also reduces the light, the thing that says 100 on the top of the screen at the exploration. That does a few things. Mostly, it increases the chance that you'll get the debuffs, the purple debuffs that permanently debuff an operator. But we had the protection HP, which are the one-time use lives that don't regenerate, and because of those we didn't lose any light. I was debating upgrading Gavio as well, but we need a bit more damage, so we went with Mei. This stage is kind of boring, honestly. I think it's my least favorite stage in IS2. It's really easy, the enemies are harmless, it just takes 2 minutes to clear because they spawn kind of slowly, so it's annoying to do it. We'll just skip to the end. The red guards from chapter 7 are pretty strong. If there were a few more of them, they could potentially kill Quartz, but there just weren't enough of them. The duck here is kind of a free kill because it takes such a long path. If you have a poor, you might be able to pull it into the hole. I actually don't know what the duck's weight it is. The bear definitely can be pulled, and the dog is easy to pull, even with an E1 poor, but I'm not sure where the duck lines up with that. I'll have to try it sometime. Healing effectiveness for Quartz, so keeping her alive longer. And we upgrade Pudenko. A Vanguard is also fine, but we're opening Quartz first, so Myrtle isn't too useful. We can do the Omen stage without an issue this time, but I don't want to repeat stages, so I'll do the other one for people who haven't seen them. This is, I think, the easiest stage on the second floor, despite having a bunch of enemies. You just have a very slow stream of enemies, 2 casters that's AFK until the end, and some spiders. You can just put one up, a medic at the box, and kill everything without much issue. But by this point you have other operators, so you can use them to kill all of the dangerous things before they reach your defense, like the casters and the spiders. That was kind of a brainlet move for me. I should have put Ethan on the left caster, because then he wouldn't get frozen. I have no idea why I put him in the middle. Not that it matters, because this stage is easy. We get a dog spawn at the end. We kind of have an unreliable team for killing it. If you have a dice, it's really good for killing the dog, because when you put down the dice, it will not make it to the other end of the operator before its stun ends. By the way, getting a poor is really good in IS3, because there's a crazy amount of maps that have holes. I think I should have used Pudenko S2 first. It probably has an effect where if it hits something before it goes invisible, it will keep tracking it. Earth Spirit and Suzuran do something similar, though I haven't actually tested that. I'll have to go and check it if it works with Pudenko. The item at the top was to clear 1 debuff of those purple ones. We're not going to get any debuffs, so we don't care about that, so we get a bunch of free lives. The item we're picking gives us 40% elemental resistance, so we get the debuff that reduces res less often. This is extremely useful to Quartz, as you can imagine. Again, we're going straight for the emergency stage. We have a bunch of protection, so we take the extra money. this stage, precarious defense. Something you should know about it is that it's much harder in emergency than normal, because the bottom box normally spawns those enemies that take bleed damage constantly, but on normal it spawns the melee ones. On emergency it spawns the ranged ones, which makes the stage much more dangerous. I forgot it spawned the ranged ones, so I threw Myrtle in their range. Of course, we're still on Ascension 0, so there's no stage that's actually that dangerous. The way Ascensions work is they both increase enemy stats and then give up some random debuff on top of that, like operators costing more, specific enemies having more stats, so it gets a lot harder as you go up in difficulties. But in base difficulties, anything should work fine. You shouldn't struggle much once you know the stages. For this stage, the best thing to do is to just drop one operator with a medic or a healing defender on the left side and then throw everything else in killing the bleeding enemies. The operators on the right will take care of any strays that leak from the left too. Behold, Ethan doesn't need a medic. Incidentally, I love Quartz 3-star victory line. It's like, we can celebrate, we no longer have to eat my cooking. It's pure depression. She knows she's useless. We get another terribly useful item for Quartz that buffs operators I don't have. Well, I do have a 4-star therapist, but I don't want to use him because he can't really stop the debuff on the boss. The jellyfish applies it too fast, and his own healing is kind of worthless, so I'm just better using normal medics and ignoring the debuff entirely. Even in a normal play where I don't use Quartz, so I care more about the defense buff, it's still better to just ignore it. This is a pretty straightforward stage. We just need to deploy Quartz and... Oh, what's Myrtle doing there? Oh, I'm sure nobody saw that. Anyhow, we deploy Quartz first, and then we'll just set up the rest of our operators and beat everything to death. The slugs are kind of annoying, but at least they make Quartz have 3 block, so she works like she's supposed to, and she's an actual AoE guard now. On higher difficulties, this stage would probably kill Quartz because of the 0 defense, but on Ascension 0s the slugs have too little damage to overpower E1 Gavio. For some reason our Myrtle is on cooldown, so we couldn't block the slug that came through, and we leaked one enemy, but now we deploy her backup. The reason this stage gets pretty hard later on is because when enemies have increased attack, they also do increased elemental damage. So the debuff will get applied much faster than it gets applied now, if you leave the car alive. On Ascension 0 it's fine to ignore it. You get 1 debuff applied at most, if even that. But on higher Ascensions, I'm not sure what the risks here were actually called. I'm just calling them ascensions from Slay the Spire. The extra difficulties where it gradually scales super high. Same thing as Slay the Spire really. Though they are high, the difficulty scales harder than it does in Slay the Spire. The only thing I miss from Slay the Spire to IS3 is that it had this awesome difficulty bump at the end where you have to fight 2 bosses instead of 1. That would have been awesome in IS3, I would have really enjoyed it. But it works a bit differently. The bosses in Slay the Spire are randomized, whereas in IS3 you have to do a quest to get a different boss. So it's not quite the same.
Mission accomplished. 完璧な勝利を得ることは美しいお花を咲かせることと同じように大変なお仕事ですね。
And we get another healing item for Quartz. This ring makes one tile on the field restore HP and SP. It's a random tile, so it could be a ranged tile too. Whether it will be useful to me or not is dependent on luck. Emergency Dispatch does a lot of stuff. It removes a debuff, it E2s an operator, and it gives you 4 ingots. So it's usually higher value than most other nodes, especially on higher ascensions where you can remove nasty debuffs. This is the exact same map, but now it's not an emergency, so it spawns the melee versions instead. Apart from that, it's exactly the same. We got a good tile from the ring, so we'll make use of it. And just have Quartz beat the shit out of everything. If they were at higher health, they would have killed her through Gavio. Those enemies are really scary, since they have both high attack and high attack speed. Quartz health is super useless against them.
Accomplished.
We finally to Gavio. Now she can keep Quartz alive. Somehow I still haven't bothered to unlock the Medic or Vanguard models. They're all kind of whatever for challenge runs, so I don't really care about them. I'll get around to it at some point, I'm just lazy, and I've been playing IS3 all day instead. The gimmick of this boss is that there's 2 bosses and you have to kill them both at the same time. It's mostly a free win stage as long as you have enough operators to handle both lanes. You can camp closer to the blue box if you're limited on operators, so one medic can cover both a melee operator on the left and on the right side. Well, bottom and top side. I kind of messed up with the positioning here, because I forgot how the stage works. What I should have done was put Mei on the top left tile facing up, and she would have just killed the boss really early on. Because it's kind of squishy. I now remembered I should do this, so I retreated Mei for later. If you kill only one boss, they just AFK for a bit and then revive. I think it's technically the hardest of the 3 fights you can get, but I wouldn't say it's difficult. The chapter 10 emergency stage is more dangerous than it. I didn't really consider it when I was playing, but these bosses are basically one singular boss, so can it really be called a quartz kill if she only kills one of them? If I do a run like this in the future, I'll find a way to kill them both at once in the blue box. Otherwise I don't think it counts.
Mission accomplished. 大勝利！ドクター、私ちゃんと役に立てた？
No dice, so we can't open the chest. We pick the most useful operator that we can, which is Cutter, since Jaya is banned, and we already have Ethan. Honestly, I should have banned Cutter for this run. Because she's so overpowered with some of the items you can get in IS. We honestly don't need Myrtle for anything, so we're ditching her. This is floor 4 now, so all the stingrays start showing up. They're really dangerous enemies, though you won't see much of that because of how low the difficulty is still on normal mode. We deploy our Vanguard to take care of the normal enemies, and then we have to set up our anti-air. We changed Mei to S2, and we cycle her and click to shoot the stingrays out of the air. I would like to have Quartz be the tank instead of Ethan, but we were forced to use her as a Vanguard. With this squad, even if I didn't have to deploy Quartz first, I would still end up deploying her first, just what it is. That was a bad deploy of Gavio. I should have deployed Click first. He will get targeted over her now. It shouldn't really matter, but it's a general mistake. Once the stingray gets shot, it gets grounded and no longer has a ranged attack, but it still has really high damage. It can be dangerous in higher difficulties, even once it's on the ground. Especially because its health pool is so freaking fat. A lot of the maps with stingrays actually have them fly over holes, so if you can stun them, you insta-kill them. That's one of the reasons why it's so important to have stun. They get super annoying on higher difficulties and you can just remove them entirely. How do people feel about the difficulty in IS3, by the way? Personally, I prefer the Slay the Spire Ascension style to just having 2 difficulty options for a couple of reasons. First, it's a gradual change, so you can kind of get accustomed to it. And second, it really changes how you play the game between normal and the highest one. Hard mode in IS2 is kind of the same once you get used to it, enemies have a bit higher stats, you get 2 items that give you attack and it makes no difference. But I think the difficulties here affect you more, so it's more interesting to me. Because it changes some of the operators I would pick.
了解。カッター入隊する。罪なき人を巻き込まないように十分に準備して。
時間通りだ。
そこも質問させてもらうのだ。
Because of the health regen item and the increased health, Quartz has pretty ridiculous health regen. So she can basically solo for the most part. Gavio is only needed for tougher enemies. Ethan is really helpful on this stage. You kind of just deploy him on the right and he'll kill everything at E2.
わかりました。
何やってんだ。
Sadly, there isn't much for Quartz to do here. So, move forward a bit to a more interesting stage.
やっちゃおっか。こういう雑草ならたくさん見てきます。
暴力じゃ何も解決できないけど、お前を料理するには十分だぜ。
I kind of regret deploying Ethan on the stage. It left Quartz with nothing to do. We could have just seen how she does against the enemies. And by the way, I think Ethan with Modo is stronger in IS3 than Jaya. He just dominates so many stages. Because he stops the ranged crabs from damaging you, they barely do anything to him. And then he does damage. And if you get one of those books that gives you attack when you dodge, it just becomes ridiculous and kills everything himself.
はいはい、私が何とかします。
この一撃で決める。しっかりしろ。
このテーザー銃の威力
One shot away from
見
win.
せてやるのだ。
暴力じゃ何も解決できないけど、お前を料理するには十分だぜ。
私の予定
You might notice that there's only 2 enemies left, but there's 43 lives. We're going to get a dog here. And this map has the most throw pathing for the dog, duck and bear in the entire game. Just look at this shit, it just goes straight into the blue box with the shortest path possible. Unless you're entirely prepared for it, you just 100% leak. There's no time to set up anything. So I didn't have time to redeploy my operator, so he just walks in.
言う通りにしますね。このテーザー銃の威
Whoa.
力見せてやるの
I was hoping it was at least the other box, so it gets blocked by Quartz or something, but not even that. It just goes into the closest box. Tactical dog. I keep leaking the dog in this run. I'll get my revenge soon enough.
私の料理なの食べずに済むしな。
We get Perfumer as our second medic, because she's the most useful for the boss. We don't need her for now, so she stays off the team. This stage is a free win if you have some kind of silence to kill all of the dodge enemies.
少しだけ遅れた。だが問題は。
Quartz can't really do much to them, so we deploy her to take care of the chest.
わかりました。
And also catch the early enemies. The reduced elemental damage is decent here,
私が何とかし
because this is the stun debuff, not the defense down debuff.
位置についてこの眼帯に気を取られているようでは逆に見透かされるぞ。治療の準備だ。位置についたぞ。
And now we move her because she won't be useful there anymore. We'll move her to the ring tile, so she gets the increased healing.
しっかりしろ。
現場操作なのだ。アレルギーに気をつけてね。
We don't have a therapist medic, because Chestnut isn't... I find him kind of unreliable in IS3, so we can't really have Quartz do much here,
どこにいたい？
unfortunately.
私が何とかします。
しっかりし
She
ろ。
just gets stunned after a few hits.
戦場は墓場よ。
even if we activate the tower that restores
しっかりしろ
your elemental health, it's just not enough to make a difference.
みんなどいて
The flowers have too much elemental damage.
少しだけ遅れただが問題はない
暴力じゃ何も解決できないけど
Something I forgot
お前
to
を
check
料理
that
するには
should be
十分だ
useful knowledge is if you can activate the tower with the dice. I'm pretty sure you can, but I've never bothered to test.
私に近づきすぎないでくれ味方を誤って傷つけたくない
The buff tags are kind of nasty. If you feel they're doing too much damage, it's a good idea to just retreat everything and leave like just 1-2 operators to DPS them.
はいはいこのテーザー銃の威力見せてやるのだ
しっかりしろ
ドクターの言うみんなどいて
Thankfully the duck runs around a lot.
位置に私に近づきすぎないでくれ味方を誤って
Nice turn.
傷つけ
皆さんの援護は
今はもっとやれ
And that's a dead duck.
何やって
Nobody
んだ
escapes from Ethan. It wasn't a dog this time, so we could actually kill it. I mostly have problems with the dog because I'm running only one walker. If you have 2 walkers in the squad, it gets stuck between them and then it's easy to murder. But with just one, you basically get half a second where it's visible. We get the Ethan ultra buff combo. Now Ethan is God. He has both attack and dodge, and when he binds something, he does massive art damage. A pretty useless shop. We have light, which we don't really care about, and buffing the summons. We recruit everything we have here because there's not much else to do with our money. So we might as well empty out the shop. You have a reroll option on the shop that can bring in new items. It's useful because it can replace items you've already bought, so if you have a lot of money you should always do it to buy even more items than you normally would be able to. I'm never sure what guard to get after Cutter when I play IS3 normally. I find the other guards to be kind of useless. Moose is kind of good versus the third boss, Skadi, because she can debuff her, but other than that, I really don't care what guards I'm using. They're kind of dead draws for me. We had 2 options for items. One buffs melee operators with 15% attack, the other makes Umbria one-shot anything with less than 20% HP. That's a pretty easy choice, since one buffs quartz and the other doesn't. And we have the dog again. Oh my god, the dog is owning me, this runs so hard. Why did I add Umbrio? I'm drunk. I'm going to lick the dog again. It's kind of ironic watching it now, because I did a lot of runs after this, since I was too lazy to record it. And while I was playing, I had a run where I killed the stupid dog 4 times. So it's kind of funny to me watching just licking it 4 times now. Or was it 3 times? We had the ice stage, the one where it just goes straight into the box. This one. Am I forgetting something? I'm too lazy to check the recording. So on this stage you can reveal the dog, but you don't have tiles to trap it, so you kind of need to kill it with ranged operators. I think my mistake here was not deploying Ethan straight away, since he can keep the dog in place. This is kind of a funny stage, by the way, so the dogs will now come out of the middle and go to the left, but before the dogs comes out you get this. I really love a lot of the stage design in IS3. The first time I saw this I just started laughing, it's so good. Now the dog is waiting to make sure you're forced to kill the flags unless you use something like Suzuron. I love it. And then the ultra buff dog comes through. The reason I didn't block it is because the dog is going to 2-shot Cutter anyway, so I think he could do more damage if she doesn't block it. you have two walkers in the squad, it gets stuck between them, and then it's easy to murder.
Mission accomplished.
Maybe it would have been better to block it. Oh well, there's a better way to do the stage before it gets to this point anyway, so that's kind of moot. I didn't pick a supporter because I don't care. Other than Pudenko, I don't want any other supporter. Physical dodge, so Quartz can proc the attack buff, and she gains SP on hit. That's a massive buff to cut her up, and it's kind of okay for Quartz. The item reduced the hope cost of 4 stars, but I don't care about the hope cost of 4 stars, I'm not going to run out of hope. There's no rat anymore to give you infinite items, so it's a useless item to me. At least on low difficulties. On higher ascensions, 4 stars start to cost 3 hope, so that item becomes a lot more useful if you get it early on.
時間通りだ。位置についてこの眼帯に気を取られているようでも逆に見透かされるぞ。
Because of all the defensive items we have, Quartz becomes pretty much unkillable,
ここは一
so
旦
she can actually use her damage effectively on her own.
家まで送ろうか。
This is the easiest stage you can possibly get on the 5th floor. If you're on the 5th floor and not sure what stage to do, always take this one, it's a free win.
わかりました。
Basically you just have enemies that walk around for 5 minutes and don't go into the blue box, so you have plenty of time to kill them.
気をつけて。
There's just one enemy that shoots trench tiles, and one medic will take care of it.
わかった。わかった。遅れたね。はい。アレルギーに気をつけてね。
治療してほしいやつは前に出ろ。少しだけ遅れた。だがもう今助けてやる。
ここね。はい。皆さんの援護は任せてください。痛くないので。
Half of these enemies won't even go to the blue box. If you look at the top left corner of the screen, there's a Hoenn there, and the red enemy and another one, they just go into it on their own. You don't even have to kill them.
こういう雑草なら。
It's kind of weird because most of the stages on the 5th floor are really dangerous, but this one is so easy. I think it was the same in IS2, where you had a bunch of hard stages and then there was that stage with a bunch of balloons where you just shoot them and the stage ends.
はい。一度しか警告しないのだ。
Oh, I killed it instead of letting him fall into the hole. My bad.
ここね。私の役目は刀を振る声を出すな。わかった。私の目を見て。
Maybe I should have let them reach Quartz, so she can actually fight them. But they can't even kill Cutter, so they don't have a chance of going through her nearly 10,000 health. More spear gen for Cutter. May can't use it because we need her stun skill. It's more useful than her S1, even with buffs. We get supporters again, and we don't need those. Ubi Bona Somnia? What's that supposed to mean? Something like have a good dream? This stage is definitely not a good dream. The normal mode of this stage is really easy, but the emergency is fucking horrible. This is the scariest, one of the scariest emergencies, I think. If you have a bunch of defenders so you can block all the flowers, you can be fine, but if you don't, and you probably won't because who the hell wants to have a bunch of defenders in IS3 other than Tums, you're kind of gonna have to deal with them while dealing with everything else, and then it becomes really annoying. The difference in the emergency stage, and why it's so dangerous, is the enemy with the spear. There's actually two of them that break rocks from both sides, so it completely changes the map and it becomes a map with 2 lanes instead of 1. And they get a much shorter path to the blue box rather than having to go around like this. It becomes a completely different stage on the emergency, unless you have the DPS to just kill the dudes with the spears. But that's kind of hard on higher difficulties. They're a really tanky enemy with decent defense and
時
res.
間通りだ。ここは一旦武器を収めた方がいいか。
いくらでも振り返るな。
By the way, one of the plants in this stage is bugged. It's this one here. Even after you wake it up, it just sits there and doesn't move.
どうすりゃ目の前真っ暗になってねえか。
やっちゃおっか。家まで送ろうか。いくらでも私の目を見て。
祝うべき勝利だ。ロドスへ帰還したら皆ももう私の料理など食べずに済むしな。よし、お前ら落ち着いていけよ。
This stage has two
時間
variations.
通りだ。
The artillery drone can either spawn on the left or the right.
さあ、各自隠れ
It's
て。
really nasty if it spawns on the right, because you have to direct your operators backwards to kill it, and that makes it annoying to deal with the following waves.
ドクター、
But more importantly, this is the Quartz Sim stage. I've already
治療し
uploaded
てほしい
separately.
やつは前に出ろ。
Basically, Quartz is unkillable. She has 3000 attack because of the dodge buff, and she'll take care of all the ground enemies herself.
射撃補助モジュール
Don't even need to spare a medic for her.
はいはいワットローン飛べ。
If you have a good nuke for the slow drones, this stage becomes
外
easy.
は危ないからね。
But if you don't have a lot of anti-air, never pick this stage. It will just
今
kill
助
you.
けてやる。
一度
There's a ton of air enemies. If you can't deal with them, you're gonna leak a ton. I was kinda surprised that there were no stingrays in this stage, to make it even more horrible. But I guess they were going for a mechanical unit team. So it's just drones. And some random people who made it to the bottom of IS3. No idea why they're here. Let's not think about it
攻
too
撃の
much.
タイミングが重要だ。
痛くないのだ。ちょっとビリビリするだけなのだ。
何やってんだ。
家まで送ろうか。はい、私が何とかします。ドクターのみんなドフリーズなのだ。
祝うべき勝利だ。ロドスへ帰還したら皆ももう私の料理など食べずに済むしな。
We have extra lives or the dodge buff. The dodge buff benefits Quartz, so it's the only option. Not that I would need lives anyway. When you have the dodge buff and a way to proc it on your operators, you really don't need anything else. We throw out Podenko and bring in the extra medic, so we can bully the boss harder.
罪なき人を巻き込まないように十分に準備して。
少しだけ遅れた。だが問題はない。ここは一旦武器を収めた方がいいか。
5200 attack,
し
very
かし
nice.
私の剣は
やっちゃおっか。怖くはないわ。
We deploy Click earlier than Perfumer, so Click doesn't take any damage
ここ
from
は
the boss
私に
later.
近づきすぎないでくれ。味方を誤って傷つけたくない。
Perfumer will be easier to heal because she has higher health.
ここね。
治療してほしいやつは前に出ろ。しっかりしろ。
And the reason Gavio can't reach click is because we want that tile to be open for Mei, so she can stun the boss.
現場操作なのだ。
She can do it from the other tiles obviously, but then Mei would be outside of
しっ
healing
かり
range.
しろ。
ここだ
This
こ
is
こ。
better.
目の前真っ暗になってみんか。
アーツの治療範囲に入れ。
痛くないのだ。ちょっとビリビリするだけなのだ。どうしたのだ？事件なのだ？
ここは一体この一撃で決める。
よっしゃ
何やってんだ。
射撃補助モジュール展開っと。
ここだここ。俺が見えないだろ。
ここね。
アーツの治療範囲に入れ。
ん？
We want the boss with Mei, and now Quartz can
こ
fight
こは
it.
この眼帯に気を取られているようでは逆に見透かされるぞ。アーツの治療範囲に入れ。
She barely does any damage until she dodges once and then gets a massive attack buff. Like that. I like how it's a 6-second
しっかりしろ。
attack buff, but she can only get one attack off of it because of the boss slow aura.
私の役目は刀を振るうことだ。繰り返るな。いくらで私の目を見て。
ここはこの眼帯に。
フリーズなのだ。
アーツの治療範囲に入れ。
いくらでも声を出すな。ポートキャリブレーション中よ。ええ、落ち着いて。見えたよ。
アーツの治療範囲に入れ。
あんたそれ、声を出すな。いくらでも遅れたね。
位置につこの一撃で決める。位置について何やってんだ。
分かった。現場操作なのだ。この一本が最後だから。
And that's it for the Quartz run. Sorry I took so long to upload it, I'm lazy. I now have a bunch of footage to go through for a lot of IS3 videos though.